So I'm in the homework 2.3 directory, and I'll show you the code here because it actually doesn't include the parts that you need to write for the assignment. So if we go into our blog directory, look at the files inside, notice we don't have a node modules directory. So the first thing we actually want to do is just install the dependencies. So let's just take care of that. Alright, so now we've installed our modules. So next, we'll try to run it and see what happens. So looks like we have our Express server listening on port 3000 just like we did before. Let's go to our blog, see if we notice anything wrong. So the first thing we'll do is refresh the page, and notice our old posts are still there. And let's just try to log in. Alright, so it looks like we can't log in. Validate login not yet implemented. Alright, so that's weird. Well, let's see if we can sign up with a different user. Alright, so that's weird. Add user not yet implemented. So we actually can't log in and can't sign up, and therefore we can't actually make posts. So it's not actually that useful right now. So that's actually going to be your assignment, and I'll actually go into the code and show you exactly where that is. And notice we have some scary looking stack traces here. That's actually just part of our error handling code, which I'll also talk about. So finally we'll get to the code that you have to implement for the homework this week. So this is in users.js. So remember when we went to the blog, there were a few pages that returned errors and said not yet implemented. So one of them was validate user and the other one was add user. So let's take a look at these functions. Alright, so this is the add user function of the user's data access object. So this takes a username, a password, an email, and a callback, and actually creates a new user. So this is what's going to be called from our sign-up page. So here we're doing some generation of the password hash. We're creating a new document for this user with the username and the password hash, possibly adding the email, but we're not actually doing anything with it yet. So here's where we get our error, add user not yet implemented. So notice we're following the Node.js convention of the first argument to the callback being an error object, and the second argument being the actual data we're returning. So when you implement this, you want to actually call back with an error here if some error occurred, and call back with potentially some value if you succeeded in adding the user. So you're going to actually have to look a little bit in the sessions.js file that uses the user data access object to get a sense of how this is being used and what kind of callback is passed in. So your job is to fill in this code right here to add a user when one tries to sign up. Alright, so now let's look at the next function. Alright, so this is the validate login function. And this one's a little bit more complicated, but most of the work is actually factored out in this validate user doc function. So we'll briefly go over that and see which parts of that you have to implement. So validate login function takes a username and password and a callback, and the way the callback works is it will either return a user if we found a user and our password looks right, or it will call back with an error if we've had a database error or an invalid password or our user doesn't exist. So if we look down here, we can see that we're not actually getting any document from MongoDB. So this is what you need to do to make this function work for homework 2.3 is actually get the user document from MongoDB. So this function is actually complete and kind of encapsulates all the work you need to do after getting the document, including checking the error object. So once you actually make the call to MongoDB, you can just use this function directly. You can just pass the error object and the user document straight to this function, and it should hook up. Alright, so that's the big crash course on how our blog project works, and an introduction to homework 2.3. So just to recap, this is our main. These are our routes for Express. They contain some helpers that describe the work we need to do for each route and actually register the routes. And these three files are our data access objects to MongoDB. So they have helper functions for accessing or modifying the various collections. So for homework 2.3, you'll be modifying the users.js collection so that login and sign up actually works correctly.